Hey, this is John Swanson, 300wordsaday.com. I'm going to talk today about understanding the text, understanding the biblical text. A couple of days ago, my friend Kim came in and had a question that a couple of people were asking her about a couple of verses in the Bible, and she was looking for some advice and looking for explanation about a couple of things. So I said, well, let me tell you how I'd go about the process of coming up with an answer to that question. And then I realized that you might be interested in that process as well. So we're going to take a look at probably 7 steps in understanding the text. First step comes from John Goldengay in a class lecture that I was just listening to the other week. Goldengay said, I don't have answers to questions that the Bible doesn't know the answer to. I don't have answers to questions that the Bible doesn't know the answer to. It was a great thought. Lots of times we fight about explanations, and there really isn't an explanation in the text. It's one of those things that's not talked about at all. Or there is what I would suggest intentional ambiguity in the biblical text. So the first step is to understand that we're not going to understand everything, and that's okay. Second step, I said, is take a look at different Bible translations. Now, there are a range of different kinds of translations. Some of them are very much word for word. They go to the original Greek or the original Hebrew, Hebrew for the Old Testament, Greek for the New Testament. And they translate almost a word for word kind of translation. On the other hand, there are translations that are more thought for thought. Rather than going so much into the Greek as it spoke then, they say, okay, what's this mean in more contemporary language? And then there are, on the third hand, translations, which are usually called paraphrases, that are way more idea by idea. They are almost as if you and I sat down and I started explaining what the text meant. So there's clarity in them, but there ends up being some perspective that shows up as well. So in the more word for word, you have translations like the ESV, English Standard Version, like the New American Standard Bible, NASB. In the idea for idea, you've got the New International Version, the NIV. And then over further, you've got paraphrases like the Living Bible or the Message, Eugene Peterson's writing out of the Bible. And anytime you're trying to make sense of a text, you're looking and saying, what does this mean? It makes sense to sample from this kind of a translation and this kind of a translation and this kind of a paraphrase. To get that perspective, it's really easy to do at BibleGateway.com because you can look at, 16 versions at a time, and you can put them in columns side by side. But sometimes being able to look at the text in those different ways of translating ends up helping it make sense to us. The third step that I do is I assume that a verse, a sentence, exists in the context of a whole book, exists in the context of everything a particular writer wrote, and makes sense in the context of the whole Bible. So to take one little phrase outside this bigger context is like taking one sentence that I say outside the context of all of the rest of what I say. I realized a couple weeks ago that there are some people that know me really well, and to stop and keep apologizing to them and explaining how I am, it's not necessary, because they know me well enough to know how to take that. They know the context of my sentences. So if I'm having a hard time understanding, some text from the Bible, I look at other parts of the Bible to see how do those pieces fit together. What are those threads that run through? The fourth thing that I do is I actually occasionally ask the author. I have this funny sense that God was involved in the writing of the Bible and is still involved in the interpreting of the Bible. And so it makes sense if I have a question to say, okay, God, what do you mean by this? And on one hand, you can say it's partially a humility. On the other hand, it actually helps sometimes. The fifth thing, and this is going a little further, lots of times I'll look in a commentary. Now notice, I won't look at the commentary until I've looked at other translations, until I've looked at all of the rest of Scripture. But sometimes you can have a commentary that really is a collection of sermon notes or writings like that. This particular commentary is actually a day-by-day kind of walking through a book of the Bible that the person did, so it's commentary that way. Or you can go to a larger commentary like this. So all of those are additional helps in understanding. Some of those are available online. There are a couple at BibleGateway.com, and there are a couple available at uversion.com. Sixth thing that I do, this is taking an even further step. I look at theologians from different perspectives and from different times and from different traditions. Theologians are people who spend their time trying to figure out what the Bible means. And it's helpful to look at a range of theologians who have looked across time to try and understand this. For example, one person I know suggests that you, if you have a question about a particular idea, that you look at Augustine, Aquinas, Luther, Calvin, and Wesley. Among those five, they run across about 1,300 years of writing, 1,400 years of writing. They run across very different traditions in Christianity. And so when you come to a text and all of those perspectives say, here's what it means, it's possible that that's what it means. If, on the other hand, among those five, there are five different perspectives, it may mean that there's some ambiguity in the text, and that it's one of those ideas that is fun to argue about, but we're not going to come up with an answer because we've been working at it for 1,300 years and haven't been able to come up with a single definitive answer. So it's helpful to look at theologians from different perspectives. So there are 6 things that I would do in taking a text and trying to understand what it means. You've got an advantage that I don't. You can ask me and make me do some of that work, but what I'd be doing is that very same work. So hope that's helpful. Gives you a picture of a way to walk through understanding a difficult text. It's what I do. You can try it too if you want. John Swanson, 300wordsaday.com. Thanks for stopping by.